It began with silence, not the kind bred from peace, but the kind that followed disappointment, a hollow, ringing stillness that echoed down the crystalline corridors of the Varelian sub-outer habitat. The air was cold, filtered too many times through ion scrubbers, leaving behind only a sterile imitation of breath. Lights hummed faintly above, casting everything in the pale hue of dying stars. Sal stood beneath them, her arms limp at her sides, long ears drooping slightly in a way that would have made her the target of childhood mockery. Had anyone ever bothered to talk to her long enough to mock her? Next, the voice droned from the elevated pulpit, mechanical and flat. It wasn't a real Varelian, just a synthesized proxy connected to the council's central node. None of them could even be bothered to appear in person. Sael blinked slowly, not quite hearing the order until a small nudge from behind reminded her that she was, in fact, still standing in front of a very large, very bored audience. Or at least, a row of surveillance drones humming like over-caffeinated hornets. She turned and walked toward the edge of the platform, careful not to trip over the hem of her robe. Her boot caught slightly anyway. Classic. Somewhere in the chamber someone snorted. Probably Sector 7A. Jerks. Disqualified, the voice intoned. Disqualified. Not even a trial. No physical exam. No psionic compatibility test. Not even a scan for residual genetic enhancement potential. Just no. She could have brought a banana and juggled it with her thoughts, and the result would have been the same. The council had long since decided her fate. It had just taken them this long to get around to saying it out loud. Sal walked through the exit tunnel with the grace of someone who'd perfected the art of not crying while being publicly humiliated. Outside, the air felt thinner, even though she knew it was chemically identical. The sky above shimmered with a pink-orange bloom, the result of constant atmospheric refraction from Virelia's trisons. The sight might have awed her once. Now it just made her squint. She passed others, Virelians with straight backs and glowing temple nodes, all with that smug lilt in their steps that screamed, "I can bend space with my mind, and you can't even order tea without the machine correcting your syntax." She hated them a little. Not out of jealousy exactly. More like out of a growing suspicion that the universe had a deeply flawed sorting algorithm. Her feet took her back to the residential sector, a low-tier hive of hexagonal chambers and oxidized door panels. Her pod's entry system blinked red before recognizing her biometrics and sliding open with the same enthusiasm as a door attending its own funeral. The moment she stepped inside, the lights flickered dramatically, not as part of an ambush or dramatic power surge, just bad wiring. Again. She kicked the wall. The light brightened. "Good to see you too," she muttered. The room was a mess of half-assembled gadgets, broken interface pads, and a single chair that had given up the idea of structural integrity 2 years ago. She slumped into it anyway. The chair groaned. Sal pulled off her outer robe, tossing it over a console, and stared at the blinking terminal on her wall. It blinked back. A message. She opened it. Notice of rejection from Varelian High Command. Subject. Sale of genetic code. Rung Delta 4. Conclusion, unfit for service. Transference to Fringe Settlement 9A authorized. Departure mandatory by dawn cycle. She laughed. It was a dry, weird sound. Sort of like someone trying to whistle while swallowing sarcasm. "Well, at least I don't have to sit through any more pep talks about the Varelian ideal," she muttered, then paused. "Who am I even talking to? The wall?" The wall made no comment. By dawn, she was on the transport skiff, alone, save for the pilot drone that didn't even acknowledge her presence. The journey to Fringe 9A took 5 hours, during which Sile entertained herself by counting the visible microfractures in the transport ceiling panel, 12, wondering how many protein cubes were left in her travel pack, 3.5 if she didn't count the one that tasted like disappointment, and composing angry internal monologues aimed at people who would never hear them. When the skiff dropped her off, it didn't even wait for her to get her bag. Just opened the hatch, gave a sad hydraulic hiss, and dumped her onto the rust-red sand of the outskirts. "Charming," she muttered, brushing grit from her boots. The settlement was little more than a scatter of prefabricated shelters and a central dome housing a defunct weather stabilizer. The only signs of life were a pair of small service bots playing something suspiciously close to rock, paper, scissors with scrap metal. She was halfway to the shelter dome when something exploded not far off to her left. It wasn't a massive explosion, more like a controlled detonation with poor manners. Dust rose. Metal groaned. Curiosity, boredom, and a lingering disregard for her own safety led her toward the source. Behind a rock outcrop, she found the wreckage of a small escape pod, smoking faintly. A figure was crawling out, humanoid, bulky, and mumbling something that sounded like, "Why do emergency landings never include snacks?" She froze. The figure looked up. Human. Scarred face, short cropped hair, and a smile that was either friendly or concussion-induced. "Hey," he said, "you got a spare protein cube?" She blinked. "Are you human?" He gave her a thumbs up. "Calder Rourke, ex-soldier, current crash dummy. And you are?" "Sale," she said cautiously. He glanced at her ears and grinned wider. "Love the ears. Kind of elven, if elves could kill you with one look." She frowned. "That's not exactly the effect I'm going for." "Shame," he said, brushing off his jacket. "So what brings you to the galaxy's least scenic garbage pile?" "I was exiled here." He gave a sympathetic nod. "Ah, you too, huh? Galaxy's got a real talent for dumping the best people in the worst places." "I'm not the best," she said flatly. Calder looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his posture. Not pity, not surprise, just interest. "Well," he said, stretching his back with a wince, "what say we find something sharp, something that explodes and prove them all wrong?" Sal blinked again. "You're insane." "Probably," he agreed, "but I've got excellent aim and very low standards for friends. You in?" She didn't smile, but her ears twitched. Maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something. Sale learned 3 things in her first 10 days with Calder Rourke. Humans never shut up. Terran rations were 76% edible and 24% suspicious paste, and training under a human soldier was roughly equivalent to being adopted by a large, battle-scarred, sarcastic sandstorm. Their base, if one were generous with the term, was a half-crumbled dome shelter patched together with heat tape, prayer, and a scavenged solar array that groaned every time someone looked at it wrong. Calder had claimed the North Quadrant, where he dragged in the remains of his escape pod and converted it into a makeshift bunk and weapons locker. Sal took the South Quadrant, which came with slightly fewer electrical sparks and marginally better air circulation. On the second morning, Calder woke her by banging a metal canister against the wall. "Rise and shine, princess," he called. "Daylight's burning, and so are your reflexes." Sal sat up groggily, glaring at him through strands of hair. "Do humans always scream greetings into metal objects?" He held up the canister. "This is called motivation. Also, I think it used to be part of a coffee machine, so you're technically being woken up by caffeine? Inspirational, right?" "You're deeply disturbed," she said, sliding out of her cot. "Yeah, well, it's gotten me this far." Training began not with weapons, but with movement. Calder had a theory. Everything in battle came down to rhythm, footwork, timing, spacing. He said it like he was quoting ancient Terran philosophy, though he once admitted he might have stolen the idea from a documentary about kung fu robots. Their first session involved dodging stun drones across the uneven terrain outside the dome. The drones were old, sputtering, and prone to firing in random directions, but they kept Sale moving. She fell often, once into a sandpit, another time into Calder himself, who caught her and then immediately asked if she was trying to hug him mid-combat. "You wish," she snapped. "True," he replied, dusting himself off, "but I don't like being tackled by angry ballerinas." By the end of the week, her movements were smoother, her stance firmer. She didn't panic when the drones fired, and she'd stopped trying to hide behind rocks that offered no real cover. Calder watched her one evening as she balanced on the edge of a broken satellite dish, eyes closed, arms poised. "Not bad," he said. "You're starting to look like someone who knows what she's doing." "I still have no idea what I'm doing," she said flatly. "Fake it till you make it," he replied, tossing her a water pouch. "Ancient Earth wisdom. Same people who invented pizza and micro-singularity bombs. Real cultural balance. Later, when the heat had dropped and the sky turned from copper to bruised violet, they sat near the fire pit. Calder insisted on a fire, even though the dome's temperature control worked well enough. Fire's primal, he explained. It makes everything taste better, even freeze-dried disappointment. Sal poked at her food cube. Is this supposed to be meat? In a metaphorical sense. Between bites of nutritional compromise, Sal glanced at him. Why did they send you away? He raised an eyebrow. Straight to the heart of it, huh? You said you were exiled. So was I. Seems fair. He leaned back, watching the sky. I questioned orders, loudly, publicly, during a weapons negotiation, apparently asking if we should be selling plasma cannons to people who train children with shock collars is bad for morale. She blinked. That's surprisingly noble. He shrugged. Or stupid. Depends who you ask. Terran High Command called it strategic insubordination and suggested early retirement somewhere unimportant. I picked here. Sale was quiet for a moment, then said, My people exiled me for failing a genetic potential scan. Calder turned to look at her. That's it? They think I'm defective. He whistled. Your civilization needs a better definition of defective, or a dictionary. She smiled faintly. We don't believe in dictionaries. Knowledge is supposed to be inherited, not recorded. Let me guess. That idea came from someone who inherited knowledge and didn't want to be questioned. You'd be surprised how much of Varelian philosophy is just rebranded elitism. He raised his protein cube in a toast. To being disappointments, then. The universe's least wanted. She raised her own. May we remain unwanted just long enough to cause serious problems. The following days brought new challenges. Calder introduced her to weapons, starting with something simple. A gravity baton. It looked like a stick until activated, at which point it pulsed with condensed gravity wells at each end, designed to knock opponents off balance without lethal damage. Sale was awkward with it at first, swinging too wide, or not bracing her stance. Calder corrected her constantly, often using metaphors that made no sense. You're holding it like a baguette, not a blade, he once shouted. I don't even know what a baguette is. Then you've missed out on one of Earth's few good ideas. Still, she improved. Quickly. Varelians, for all their dismissiveness, were agile and naturally coordinated. She began to anticipate attacks before they came. Her strikes grew cleaner, her defenses tighter. Calder, bruised from a dozen sparring matches, wiped blood from his lip after one bout. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying hitting you, she replied. That's fair. That evening they tested her against an automated defense drone. Calder had reprogrammed it from a scavenged cargo carrier and dubbed it Murder Roomba. It's small, fast, and shoots rubber pellets at high speed, he explained. Also, it insults your mother in 9 languages. You're making that up. The drone beeped, then said in a mechanical voice, Your maternal progenitor smells like industrial lubricant. Sale snorted. Then she fought it. By the end, Murder Roomba was in 3 pieces, one of which still sputtered insults as she stepped back, breathing heavily. Calder clapped. You, my terrifying, long-eared friend, just passed your first real trial. Sal raised an eyebrow. What was the trial called? He grinned. Trial of the Petty Household Appliance. She laughed, actually laughed. It was short and surprised both of them. Then silence settled. The wind outside stirred, soft and low. Sale stared into the fire. Calder. If I really do get stronger, if I fight back, they'll come for me. He nodded slowly. Good, let them. We'll be ready. She didn't smile this time, but her fingers tightened around the baton in her lap. The ember of something dangerous, confidence perhaps, smoldered just behind her eyes. The storm came in from the east, dragging with it a trail of charged dust and low, throbbing thunder that wasn't entirely natural. Sale stood at the edge of the cliff, long ears twitching in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind her, the ground pulsed faintly. Remnants of the power grid Calder had repurposed into something between a defense shield and an aggressive light show. He called it the boom blanket, which she found only marginally reassuring. They're early, Calder muttered beside her, scanning the sky through a battered scope. or impatient, or really eager to lose. Sal exhaled through her nose, calm but alert. Probably the last one. It had been 3 weeks since the Varelian scouts reported unauthorized military training on Fringe 9A. 5 days since they intercepted a coded transmission describing a violent uprising led by a genetically inadequate female. And only hours since Sael's former people decided to respond with a full aerial squad, diplomatic probes, and one very dramatic transmission requesting her peaceful surrender. Calder had laughed for 5 minutes straight. They really said peaceful surrender? Do they know you? She had not laughed. Not because she wasn't amused, but because she had been busy wiring an old plasma coil to a magnetic repeater. The new Sail didn't waste time on symbolic reactions when there were circuits to burn and plans to execute. The ships arrived like silver knives cutting through the air. Varelian warcraft with sleek hulls and precision-engineered menace. There were 5 in total, 2 scout class, 2 armed transports, and at the center, a high chancellor vessel shaped like a predator's tooth. Calder tossed her a headset. They want to talk. I'm shocked. You should fake a cough and say you're unavailable. She tapped the headset, and the voice came through in a crisp monotone that made her want to punch air. Sale of genetic code, rung Delta 4. You are hereby ordered to surrender yourself to Varelian authority. Your actions constitute unauthorized militarization, violation of genetic compliance statutes, and embarrassment to the cultural legacy of your ancestry. Calder leaned close and whispered, Wow, they really hate you. She keyed the comms. This is Sael. Your ancestry can bite me. There was a long pause. Then the ships descended. The first strike hit just outside the shield perimeter, sending up a geyser of red sand. Calder whooped, flipping a switch that caused the ground beneath the incoming transports to shimmer and erupt in electromagnetic pulses. One ship veered off course, collided with a boulder the size of a small moon snail, and disintegrated in a very satisfying way. Boom blanket's working, he called. Also, remind me to name one of our defense systems something dignified someday, like Justice Muffin. Focus, she called back, sprinting toward the outer line. Her baton, upgraded with a kinetic amplifier, hummed in her grip. 2 Varelian soldiers dropped from the sky on repulsor pads, raising pulse rifles. They didn't expect her to move first. She hit the first one low, taking out his stance, then swept the baton in a precise arc that discharged enough kinetic force to send him spiraling. The second one hesitated, which was his first and last mistake. Calder, meanwhile, had apparently modified an agricultural drone into a mobile turret because a sudden spray of hot plasma fire from what looked like a flying weed whacker sent several troops scrambling back toward their ship. Never underestimate gardening, he called. Is that another Earth proverb? Only in rural districts. The fight escalated. Drones filled the air. Varelians dressed in white and gold armor that somehow looked smug stormed the settlement's outer limits. Sal moved like liquid fire through their ranks. No longer unsure, no longer reactive. Calder fought beside her, throwing explosives like party favors and shouting insults that made no cultural sense to anyone born off Earth. At one point, he ducked behind a crate and shouted, Do you think now's a good time to talk about our feelings? Absolutely not. Cool, just checking. They fought for an hour, maybe more. Time blurred when you were dodging orbital fire and deflecting sonic blades. Then came the final push. The High Chancellor's ship descended, and from it stepped a figure dressed in ceremonial armor, polished and laced with glimmering neural circuitry. Sale recognized him. Chancellor Veleth, her cousin technically, though he'd never acknowledged her presence at family gatherings. His ears were perfectly symmetrical, of course. His voice was as condescending as ever. You've become quite the nuisance, cousin. Sal's baton ignited with a low thrum. You always hated competition. He sighed. You're not a warrior, Sal. You never were. All of this, it's borrowed strength. Then let me return it, with interest. Their duel was swift and brutal. Veleth moved like a textbook diagram, efficient, flawless. Sale moved like someone who'd learned the hard way, improvised, reactive, dangerous in ways no protocol could predict. Calder tried to intervene once, but she waved him off. I've got this. He held back reluctantly. If he kills you, I'm giving your room to a cactus. She nearly lost once. A well-placed strike sent her skidding back, vision blurred. But she steadied herself, breathed deep, and remembered the fire. Not the one in the pit, but the one in her chest. The one that came from years of being dismissed, ignored, cast aside. That fire didn't burn for vengeance. It burned for becoming. She struck low, then high, then twisted under his guard and landed a blow to the node at the base of his neck. Varelian's had a blind spot there. He crumpled with a surprised gasp. Silence. Then Calder clapped. Okay, but if you don't finish with a cool line, I'm going to say one for you. Sel looked down at Veleth. You should have let me juggle the banana. His brow furrowed. What? She turned and walked away. The remaining ships retreated. No one wanted to face a rebel who beat a chancellor with a stick. The settlement remained standing, scorched, dented, but alive. Days later, as they patched walls and welded peace together from scraps, Calder tossed her a datapad. Message from the Varelian High Command, he said. They want to reconsider your exile status. Offer you a seat at the table. She didn't look at the message, just deleted it. I've got my own table now, he smiled. Good. Ours has better snacks anyway. Sael stood at the edge of the dome that night, watching the stars shift above. No longer a failed experiment. No longer a footnote. Not just a warrior. A force. And beside her, a human with a stupid grin and too many explosives. Not bad for two galactic disappointments.